Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is now out playing in theaters. Now, this is promised to be the final Guardians movies, at least with this set of Guardians. James Gunn has made that very clear pretty much since the start of production for this movie. And another thing that he told us very early on, and that was heavily promoted in the marketing, was that this was going to tell us the origin story of Rocket Raccoon. And the exploration of Rocket's story is definitely the best part of this movie to me. Obviously, it's told through flashbacks throughout the entire runtime of the movie, but with each flashback that you get a deeper look into Rocket's character, his tragic story. You really get to see why Rocket becomes the kind of lone gunner with no one but Groot as his sidekick when we first meet him in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and this movie really does complete his story by retrospectively going back to it to putting all the pieces together. It gives us the full picture of who Rocket is as a character, and it's beautifully done. I love the way it was told in the movie. And through those flashbacks is where we're also introduced to the villain of this movie, the High Evolutionary, who is threatening the Guardians in the present as well. And when it comes to the villain of the High Evolutionary, I thought the best parts of his villainness was in the flashbacks of Rocket's story, because that's where you really get to see just how despicably evil this guy is. There is some animal cruelty in the movie, but I don't think the animal cruelty in this movie is as disturbing, at least for me personally, than people are making it out to be. I didn't think there was too much in this movie that was hard to watch. James Gunn is very clever with how he cuts and edits some of the scenes to let your imagination kind of fill in the gaps of what's going on, as opposed to just showing this brutality head on in full frame picture. But when you see what the High Evolutionary has done to Rocket, has done to other experiments like Rocket in the past in the flashbacks, it really benefits him as a villain, because when we cut to him in the present times in the movie, I didn't think he was great. He's a threat to the Guardians because he's a threat to Rocket, but as an overall villain for the movie, I didn't think he was as interesting or as memorable as Ego and even Ronan from the first film. But as mentioned before, another thing that James Gunn and the marketing has told us all this time is that this is the final entry with these Guardians of the Galaxy. And it definitely does feel like this is a finale at times. The Guardians in this movie are still the Guardians that you love to come and see. They still have the quippy one-liners. They still have the jokes. I didn't think the jokes in this one struck as hard as in Volume 2 and in Volume 1. And this movie is also the least funny of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and that's by design, because this film really dives heavily into the emotions, into the drama, into the high stakes that the film is dealing with. That whenever they do make a joke and they break that dramatic tone, it's a real delicate balance that James Gunn is dealing with the writing of this film, and for the most part, I think he handles it very well. The movie also has a bit of a challenge with its characters, because it has a lot of characters that it is trying to juggle around, one of those being Adam Warlock, who was introduced in the post-credit scene of Volume 2. He's finally in this movie. He's portrayed by Will Poulter, and I thought Will Poulter as Adam Warlock, I thought he did a great job. I really liked his character. I love the way that he played the character. I honestly think every line, every comedic beat that Will Poulter had as this character worked very well for me. But Adam Warlock is definitely more of a tool in this movie for narrative purposes than he is a real character that we're getting introduced to, and he's not in the movie for that much time. He sporadically pops in throughout the entire runtime. But when he's there, I will admit that he leaves a lasting impression. One character, though, that I was really apprehensive of going into this movie and wondering how exactly they were going to make her work is Gamora. Because this is not the Gamora from Guardians Volume 1 and Volume 2. As we know, that Gamora died in Infinity War. So this is the Gamora that was pulled from a different timeline in Endgame. And she doesn't know these Guardians, but in the trailers, you see that she's somehow part of the Guardians of the Galaxy still. So they introduce her in this movie, and what I will say is that I can see how James Gunn is trying to make this Gamora work for the story, especially affecting Star-Lord's character, but for me personally, it didn't work all that well. Yeah, the biggest hurdle that I was worried about going into the movie ended up being my biggest flaw with the movie. When we left off in Endgame, Gamora just kind of vanished. She just kind of wandered off. The Guardians didn't know where she was. When we pick up with her in this movie, her introduction makes me ask more questions than it does give me answers. And I kind of feel that way about Gamora throughout this entire movie. Now, could you have done this movie without Gamora, without Zoe Saldana coming back with these Guardians? I understand why you wouldn't want to do that, especially for the cast, because this is their final hurrah, so they probably want to finish it all together. But I will say that for the movie, I feel like it would have maybe worked better if Gamora actually wasn't in it. And I maybe sounded a little bit negative, and there's a lot more I want to say. It's all spoiler stuff, so I can't say it here. I just finished watching Guardians Volume 1 and Volume 2 in preparation for Volume 3, so having watched them so close consistently back to back, I do feel like this one is the weakest written when it comes to the story and also to the jokes. But don't get me wrong, I also don't want to seem negative on this movie because I still liked this movie quite a bit. Like I said, the Guardians, they still work. The cast is giving fantastic performances in this movie. I like what they do with Star-Lord, with Chris Pratt's character in this movie. Without going into any spoilers, there is a scene in this movie that I have been dreaming of seeing since 2014 when the first Guardians came out, and James Gunn freaking did it, and yeah, I totally cried. And that's another thing that this movie has going for it too. It is filled with emotion. You do get the sense of finality with this movie, with this franchise, and especially, honestly, with James Gunn in the MCU. To me, this movie felt more like a send-off for James Gunn and what he's done for the MCU with the Guardians movies now that he's moving on to do more stuff over on Warner Brothers with DC. Then it did feel like a finale and a goodbye to these Guardians. At least to me, that's how it felt. But while I do feel like this movie is a bit more of a mixed bag than most people appear to be feeling, it is very entertaining. It is a fun time. It still has what you love from the Guardians of the Galaxy within it. It's got a lot of the good stuff that came with the franchise. It's got some mixed feelings for me in it as well that I'll get into on spoiler conversation very soon. And yeah, I went in, I wanted to love this movie. I've been highly anticipating this movie. It's been like my most anticipated movie of the entire year, and I walked out liking it. It was slightly disappointing. I really wanted to love it, but I liked it. I think it's a fun time. I still think it's worth seeing, so for that reason, I am going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a solid recommend. Anyway, guys, that's all my thoughts and opinions that I can say anyways in a non-spoiler video on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I will be doing a spoiler conversation of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 this Wednesday with my buddy Zach Guller. Do not miss it. We're going to have a blast talking all the spoilers and everything that I can't say in this video. It's going to be so much fun. Hope to see you guys there. And if you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. We have a goal on the channel. We want to hit 2,500 subscribers before the end of the year. Now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Did you like it more than I did? Are you on the same page as me? Did you not like it at all? Comment down below. Let me know all your thoughts and opinions, guys. Thanks again for watching the video, hearing me out, and I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.